Signed. Committee Room 29. 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 Signed. Committee Room 29, 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 signed. Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
That should be us, Chair. Whenever you're ready, we're good to go.
Okay, good morning. Máidín mai agus tá fáilte roh a lig and Shaw, or Máidín, Goji and Crinnew Shaw. I welcome all members to the 83rd meeting of the Committee for Communities. We have a quorum and the meeting is now open. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off? Mobile tablet devices can be used through a Wi-Fi connection and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and please be aware of the cameras when using the tablet device, and I'd like to remind members about the sensitivity of microphones as well. For any members joining via Zoom, and at this stage we have Mark Durkin, Melissa McHugh and Maurice Bradley, please be conscious of background images throughout the course of the meeting. Moving on to agenda item 1, declaration of interest then. Can I remind members of the responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today? Does any member wish to declare any item in relation to today's business? No? Yes, Kelly?
I'm a member of the local government pension scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Andy?
Party trustee, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, Maurice? Go ahead, Maurice.
Yeah, trustee of the Harry Gregg Foundation.
Yep, thank you, Maurice.
What he mentioned.
Chair, I'm a trustee as well, and also getting a pension.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. We would never have guessed. Thank you. And I'm also a charity trustee member, so I'll declare that as well. Okay, thank you, members. So moving on then to apologies. Are members aware of any apologies? Apology from Sean. And can I check, Clerk, in relation to any other apologies?
We are not sure about Pam Cameron. She may be late, but she may not be able to attend. Mr. Bradley might know more.
Go ahead, Maurice.
An apology in the meantime from Pam. She may make it along later on,
Okay.
but I'd like to record an apology just in case.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, then moving on to Chair's business. So I'm sure members you're aware the issue of funding for the Place Names project has been discussed widely in the media this week, and indeed at our committee meeting last Thursday. I want to say first and foremost, my thoughts at this time are with everyone who worked and professionals who operated within that very important service that has been in existence for a very, very long time. I know Micheál O'Manion and his team are, I'm sure, extremely concerned around what has happened in relation to this project in what appears to be a very, very short space of time. And I'm going to walk through that here in a minute, just in terms of the timelines around that all. But my first thoughts are with all of those people. They're individuals with families and all of that, and I do want to extend my thoughts and solidarity with them, given the situation that has arisen. I also want to state that despite the fact that it's very welcome that Kiva Archibald, the Economy Minister, has acted to provide support to the service to ensure this vital service can continue, I don't think that actually fully addresses the issue by any means. There are a huge amount of outstanding questions around all of this issue. Now, I had written to the department at the end of March asking what the situation was with funding for this important project. I asked the Minister to detail how he will continue to fund the work of placenames.ni.org. I was told on the 9th of April funding for the work of the NI Place Names project was transferred from the Department of Finance to the Department for Communities in 2022. Funding is available to continue the work until summer 2026. Future funding options are currently being assessed by my officials. And that's that letter. That's that letter there. We then had the Permanent Secretary of the Department, Grania Long, and John Greer attended committee last week in place of the Minister, who was supposed to attend last week and had cancelled, and Grania Long and John Greer attended. I asked them again about the project, given my concerns, and I said, I want to ask you about the Place Names project in Queen's, a vital service that's providing interpretation and translation services for sign applications. Why have the department indicating that the funding will only last to the summer? I have to say I have a very specific concern here because this is a specialised field, and if we lose people out of that field, even were the money to be available, we may not have the people. So why is that not being seen as a priority? The Permanent Secretary told me, and I do understand the Permanent Secretary's 3 weeks in post. I know she will have had some induction. However, I do understand she's 3 weeks in post. But she stated, Chair, if you bear with me just on that particular point, I'm not across that particular detail unless, John, there's anything that you want to add, but I'm very happy to follow up, Chair, and committed to following up with me and with this committee. John Greer then stated that he'd like to take the opportunity to follow up, as Grania had offered, but without a budget, all funded parties were provided an interim allocation for the first quarter. So that could explain why they have only been provided funding until this summer. But I need to confirm if that is the case. I asked, are you okay, but you commit to coming back to us on that? And Grania Long said, absolutely. And I reiterated the point about the serious damage that I thought could have been caused as a result of an interruption to funding. It's my understanding that there was then potentially, I think there was a meeting with someone from the department or some communication later that same day or potentially around the same time as we were meeting. And the following day, the service closed. A service that was funded through the summer closed as a result of a lack of funding on the 1st of May or the 2nd of May. We then discovered in the course, throughout the course of time, further information was emerging. I then received sight of this letter, and this is a letter from 2022 from the Department for Communities. It states, Michael, I am pleased to inform you the Department for Communities is prepared to offer grant funding of up to $270,000 over the next three financial years to support the work of the Place Names project. This will be provided on the basis of $90,000 per year. It goes on to say further down the letter, revisions to this contract may be made by letter of variance at the discretion of the department. Now, with all of that being the case, I am simply at a loss to understand what has gone on here. The Minister stated on the radio that he was prepared to come into the Assembly, and I had asked an urgent oral question to bring the Minister to the Assembly. The Minister stated on the radio show that he was quite happy to do that. I was expecting that would happen. That didn't happen. The Minister did not come to the Chamber himself, as he could have done, to set out the situation in relation to this scheme. He didn't take that opportunity, and we've heard nothing since. Now, I just simply don't know what's going on here, and this feels like a department that's increasingly out of control, with the Minister allocating funding or not allocating funding at his own wish, and no one within the department holding him to account in relation to various funding decisions and other decisions that are being made. So, if members are content, I propose that we ask the Minister to appear before this committee next week to set out exactly what has happened in relation to this issue and to explain why this important project was allowed to close and all the uncertainty and disruption that has caused. Would members be content?
Agreed.
Do members wish to say anything?
Deputy
Yes,
Chair.
Kathy.
Chair, thanks for laying all of that out, because I think there has been a lot of confusion around this, and I think that confusion has been created deliberately. I don't know, it just seems we're on this merry-go-round with the department when it comes to facts. Gordon Lyons, to me, seems to forget that he's the Minister for Communities, and that's plural. The fact that he's the Minister for Irish Language Communities, that he's Minister for the GAA community, the LGBTQ community, and the communities that are living in poverty, all of this seems to be completely lost on him. And in my view, he's deliberately letting down all of them, and that is also the view of many in the sector as well. And what we've seen this week is there's no other way to say it, it's utter contempt for the Irish identity. But listen, we shouldn't be surprised by it. It's just the latest, to me, in a long line of examples of hatred and fear of a language that should be for everybody. We've seen a trend, we've seen court cases that are attempting to block the basic progress of Irish language. We've seen the removal of Irish language from the department branding. Like, come on, it's a logo. And we have seen, in my view, the deliberate stalling of the Irish language strategy. And see, this excuse of having no money, it doesn't wash with anybody anymore. There are plenty of projects that are being funded, vanity projects that there's money galore for, but when it seems to come to the Irish language, the coffers seem to be empty. My view, he should be ashamed of himself, but unfortunately I don't think he's capable of that. And not coming, as you have outlined, Chair, to the Assembly to speak on this matter and face questions. If he's so confident in his actions, why didn't he come in front of us in the Assembly? To me, that speaks volumes. You said it out. Keith Archibald has stepped in to sort it out, but we cannot continue to clear up the DUP messes when it comes to Irish language. He needs to wake up, he needs to do his job, and he needs to be the Communities Minister for everybody. So I fully back your proposal of him coming in front of this committee.
Yeah, thank you. I'm coming to Morris now in a minute. And I just did also want to say, because a lot of this is now appears to be an emerging pattern of how decisions are being made, and then not either being held accountable or not held accountable. And we've heard in this committee that officials say that in relation to a particular £40 million spend, that was not the recommendation of officials. John Greer, who was here last week and is in the department for some amount of time, heads up the Corporate Services Group, which is responsible for departmental finance. Yet last week he appeared to know nothing of any of this, and I think that's a huge concern. So it is certainly time for questions to be answered. Morris, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this was all played out in the radio, and I think the Minister made his case pretty clear where the fault actually lies. And I'm not sure that it actually lies with our committee, or indeed his department. And I would welcome the Minister coming here to the next committee meeting to outline exactly where the fault lies. But, you know, to lambast the Minister in his absence in any committee, I think is poor form. When you attack, you've lost your battle. I just don't understand the removal of the Irish language from the Minister's headlines is not actually true. There's a trilingual logo in the branding guidelines still, as far as I'm aware. So I think we need to be very, very careful of our facts, and not only careful of our facts, Chair, but very careful of the language you used. I've heard hatred here, and I don't like that word in any shape, form or fashion. And I would like it recorded that we need to examine the language used at this committee this morning, because I'm not a bit happy about some of the language that was used and some of the accusations, insinuations without proof. And I would welcome the Minister coming to the committee next week to put the record straight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Morris. And might I add that I would have preferred to raise this with the Minister. The Minister cancelled the session that we were due to have last week, and I wanted to raise this, and I did raise it with the Permanent Secretary. Melissa Lanneray.
Yeah, just and again, to Chair, I do think it's important that the Minister should attend this meeting, and that these questions should be addressed and that to the Minister. In fact, my understanding was that when this money was first, we'll say, allocated to the communities department as such, that at that time said not only that it would be their responsibility for this next 3 years, but that they in turn would always also then uh, make the arrangements to ensure that they would continue supporting the same project in the future. So, as I say, that clarity, even though people talk about confusion, there's confusion, but there's quite a bit of clarity there at the same time. And I think that the responsibility rests entirely with communities in terms of support of this project, and that for the minister then, as I say, to withdraw funding, to me that is questionable. And I raised concern about this at our last committee meeting as well too, whenever I put the same question to Mr. Greer at that time, just in relation to the funding for this project. And I had said that I was deeply disappointed at the very thought of it being withdrawn.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so members are content that we seek the Minister to attend next week. Thank you.
Just
Yes,
in
Andy.
advance of that meeting, obviously there's been a lot of this has been played out in the media, and we as committee members don't have sight of a lot of the information, a lot of back and forth between different departments, labelling blame and laying blame at different people's feet. I would say it's a sorry state of affairs, and it just further casts this place in a bad light yet again. But perhaps can we, in advance of any meeting that takes place, ask for all of the correspondence and information that has been trailed out in the media, so that we have clear sight as to what has or hasn't gone on in this regard?
Yep, thanks, Andy. And I think that's absolutely valid as well, and a well-made point, because we had written to the department following correspondence from Queen's University and raised the issue during a briefing session last week with the Permanent Secretary, and are still awaiting a substantive response. So I think it's important, vital, that that information is provided to the committee ahead of the session to allow us to prepare. Mark, go ahead.
Andy had made the point there that I'd come in to make, and that was about the importance of getting all the information that there is on this. If the Minister has nothing to hide, then he'll have nothing to hide in terms of what documentation we are provided with. But also, I suppose, there has been stuff in the media. That's what Andy asked for us to see, but I'm sure there's other correspondence that hasn't been in the media, but we need to have sight of all those documents if we're going to have the Minister and to question him about this.
Yeah, so that's a very clear that all documents are provided to this committee in relation to this matter. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you, members. So moving on then, members, I would also like to draw your attention to today's agenda. The department was scheduled since February to brief us on the post-consultation steps and progress, to update us on the crucial anti-poverty strategy, and it's in draft form at the present. However, the committee team received an email late on Tuesday afternoon cancelling this briefing. This email was forwarded to members and included in table papers at page 23 for your review and information. I advised members at last week's meeting that I will be meeting with department officials, the Minister and the Permanent Secretary on Monday regarding the committee's response to the draft strategy and our report following the sessions with local government representatives. I am extremely concerned about the lack of pace and urgency in terms of the strategy, and I will of course provide members with an update following that meeting. But I have to say I'm extremely disappointed with such a core strategy that people so desperately need to see delivered, that at the last minute a key briefing session to this committee was withdrawn. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just turning to the email that we received, the last line, well, the second last line, and it has me a little bit confused and concerned, to be honest. And I read it just: during this time we'll also be engaging with colleagues to understand how best to engage with scrutiny committees of the Assembly as the strategy and action plan are firmed up and adopted. I don't really understand why they need to think about how they're going to communicate with us. It's already been agreed that they were coming to us to give us an update on the consultation outcomes. I appreciate that the Permanent Secretary and the Deputy Secretary wanted to be part of the meeting, but I'm just concerned about the attitude being taken towards a scrutiny committee, that we can be set aside in this way. I'm very disappointed with the approach on this one. As you have said, this is a priority. It's part of the programme for government. It is taking forever for this information to come out, and I just have to wonder why the department are taking a decision on how they will be engaging with colleagues to understand how best to engage with the scrutiny committee. Surely if they're invited to a scrutiny committee, that is part of their priorities of how they should be engaging with us. They've been invited.
Long notice.
Yeah, I know they've offered to come back later this month. I think that perhaps we should invite them back alongside the Minister, because I don't really think it's appropriate for a department to be treating a scrutiny committee in this way. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I don't think I am.
Go ahead, Cathy.
I'm happy to support what Kelly's saying, because again, I know, and we've heard from the sector time and again, and the work and the effort that they have put their heart and soul into this, and I think it'll be a bit of a slap in the face to them as well today that they're not able to see our scrutiny of it. So I'm happy to, more than happy to support that.
Yeah, members content? Yeah, thank you. Also, members, I intend to speak as chair in the debate scheduled in plenary next week by the Finance Committee in relation to the draft budget based on the response agreed by the committee. The other thing is, members, and I do want to just take a moment now to, so I received from multiple sources last night an update on some issues that are unfolding in relation to the football fund. Standing Order 73 places an obligation on this committee not to prejudice active legal proceedings, which I absolutely respect. However, I think it will be useful at this stage, given reports, that I think it will be useful that we take a closed briefing session from the department in relation to that fund, if members are content.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Members agreed. Okay. Thank you, members. And so I'm going to move on then, members, to agenda item 4, which is our draft minutes. Minutes from the meeting on the 30th of April are at page 7. Can I ask members, do you have any edits or amendments to the draft minutes? No. Members therefore content with the minutes, and I will sign on behalf of the committee. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, anti-poverty strategy. As I've said there, this is a late cancellation item from the department. I have dealt with in chair's business, and members have indicated their wishes going forward. So I'm going to move on to agenda item 6, which is a UK statutory instrument, breathing space debt respite scheme, oral evidence from the department. And we are joined this morning, but first of all, members, the briefing paper for the agenda item can be found at page 131 of your meeting pack. And I'd now like to welcome the following department officials to the meeting. We have Ray Caldwell, who's Director of Voluntary and Community Division, Anne Armstrong, who is Deputy Director of Voluntary and Community Division, and Patricia Mulligan, who is Head of the Financial Inclusion Team in Voluntary and Community Division. So, Ray, I think it's yourself maybe is going to make a few opening remarks, and then we'll move to questions from members, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Chair and committee members. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to brief you on this work and introduce a breathing space scheme to Northern Ireland. I'm joined by Anne and Patricia that you've alluded to earlier, Chair, and we'll be happy to take any questions at the end. And collectively they're working on taking forward this work. So Breathing Space is a statutory respite scheme designed to support people who are experiencing serious financial difficulty. It provides individuals in problem debt with a temporary period of legal protection from creditors and preventing enforcement action during which that activity can be paused, and that includes interest, fees and charges on qualifying debts. This gives people the time and space they need to engage properly with debt advice and begin stabilising their financial position. Data from the Money and Pension Service suggests that around 11% of adults in Northern Ireland, that's some 160,000 adults, required debt advice last year, yet only 2%, around 3,500 adults, access department-funded debt advice. So too many people in Northern Ireland do not seek debt advice until their situation has escalated. When debts have spiralled, enforcement action is imminent and fewer options remain. This is made more acute by the absence of statutory debt respite protections in Northern Ireland. Introducing breathing space here will close that gap and ensure people in Northern Ireland have access to the same consumer protections as elsewhere in the UK. So this is a good news story for people in Northern Ireland. The scheme has been operating in England and Wales since 2021, and Scotland already has its own debt protection scheme in place also. Northern Ireland is currently the only part of the UK without statutory respite protections. The Executive has already agreed in principle that these protections should be introduced here through a UK statutory instrument made under Section 7 of the Financial Guidance and Claims Act 2018. Importantly, the regulations cannot take effect in Northern Ireland without approval by the Assembly, so devolved accountability is maintained fully. Following that agreement, officials have been working with HM Treasury to extend the existing breathing space scheme to Northern Ireland. Now, this approach allows us to benefit from an established and tested model, ensure appropriate alignment between the two schemes. That includes consistency for creditors who operate across the UK. Members will be aware that the breathing space scheme has two components, and just for clarity, I'll recap on those two for completeness. So the first aspect is a standard breathing space which provides up to 60 days of temporary protection from most enforcement action. During that period, most interest, fees and charges on qualifying debts are frozen. The second element is the mental health crisis breathing space. Now, this applies where an individual is receiving mental health crisis treatment, and the protection lasts for the duration of that treatment plus 30 days. Under the scheme in England and Wales, England must be certified to be receiving eligible crisis treatment by an approved mental health professional in order to access the scheme. So we're working closely with the Department of Health on that issue, who are obviously a key delivery partner, to ensure that the mental health crisis element in Northern Ireland reflects our clinical and operational arrangements and also includes an assessment of our workforce implications. Our shared focus remains to reflect the aims of England and Wales, their scheme, and ensure that eligible individuals receiving crisis level mental health treatment can access breathing space quickly, safely and appropriately, supported by those directly involved in their care. Taken together, these two routes allow the scheme to respond proportionately to both financial distress and the link that this often has with mental health crisis. Chair, our current focus is on working with pace with HMT, on progressing the policy development and required legislative process, engaging with stakeholders and ensuring that the scheme can operate effectively in Northern Ireland. The team and I will keep the committee informed with more and provide more detail as the work progresses. However, we are now happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Ray, and appreciate your presentation, and that's been actually very useful. And it is important, I think, at the outset to recognise the huge stress that people experience with problem debt, and also to recognise our advice sector out there who deal in that field and currently, are managing with and trying to manage all that and in pressurised resources times for themselves as well. So I just want to acknowledge the work that they do. The original intention was to bring forward a bespoke piece of legislation which was much wider in scope, but that plan now appears to have been shelved in favour of a much more limited statutory instrument. So why was that decision taken instead of going with our own bespoke legislation as we could have? I would be concerned that we are missing an opportunity to provide greater and more appropriate support.
Okay, well, first, Chair, most of the creditors are UK based, so the legislation would extend. But I'll pass over to Patricia, who will provide some of the background to the specifics on why we're going through a UK statutory instrument as opposed to developing our own scheme.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will give you a bit of history of why we were going to do our Northern Ireland bill. So The primary powers of the Financial Guidance Claimant Act in 2018 was to extend to Northern Ireland. It was England, the territorial extent for the debt respite scheme was territorial extent for England, Wales and Northern Ireland. We didn't have any executive at the time, so it was always the original intent that it would extend to Northern Ireland. If we had an executive at the time, we would have been considering putting a legislative consent motion, the same as Wales. Because we didn't have and there's two elements to the debt respite scheme in that primary powers, and that was the breathing space, but also a statutory debt repayment plan. Because we had no executive time, because we need Assembly approval, the primary powers were written in a way that no scheme could come into Northern Ireland without approval from the Assembly. Then we couldn't proceed in any way without the executive. So the SDRP, the statutory debt repayment plan, because Treasury moved on to the secondary regulations without Northern Ireland being included from 2020, it was decided that we would consider our own scheme. But that it would be broadly equivalent, so we would consider bringing in a breathing space type scheme and statutory debt repayment plan, a primary powers for both. When we started to look at that, primary powers, or when we did a call for evidence, there was a call for evidence in 2022, which said that the responses was that we should not align with England and Wales, but start with an England and Wales position as protections, but tailor it to Northern Ireland. We started to move on it last year when SDRP, then we found out the statutory debt repayment plan isn't progressing because as a result of a consultation, they need to do more work in a broader, wider personal insolvency framework to see if a statutory debt repayment is the right plan. That gives us an opportunity to then say, well, we're bringing breathing space. So if we brought a bill to bring through two elements, but the SDRP would be paused, we thought, how can we bring breathing space in here in Northern Ireland quicker? There's also limitations of doing a Northern Ireland scheme because it would only be enforceable with creditors in Northern Ireland. So having the secondary regulations, we already had the primary powers in the original bill. Bring it through a Northern Ireland scheme, it would broadly align for consistency with creditors and debtors. A lot of creditors, the people in debts, are UK based. We would end up with a very equivalent scheme to align with policy of the breathing space. And it wouldn't be as enforceable. We would have to take extra Westminster legislation to make it enforceable with creditors. So either way, Treasury, we were never bringing a scheme in Northern Ireland similar to the breathing space without Treasury involvement. So we asked the opportunity, is there feasibility of extending the existing scheme to Northern Ireland, with Northern Ireland tailoring any deviations that we might need for our different structures, because we differ in some structures like enforcement and mental health. So Treasury, and we went to our department solicitor's office, is it feasible? And the response was that it would be feasible and it should be something explored. It will save us doing parallel scheme, a parallel scheme that would look more or less the same, be more cost effective and quicker, probably quicker to implement. So Treasury were keen to explore it with us, so we're still exploring the feasibility of the Northern Ireland differences. We still have some future policy development to do in the areas that we deviate. So we're taking the core protections and some deviation.
Okay, so let me just focus in then on foot of that on the deviation element, and I appreciate the reason that you're setting out in relation to getting a scheme in place, and the potential to deviate to take account of our own circumstances. And the circumstances, for example, that I would like to tease out then is, so take a border town like Auchnacloy, has no bank. Some people bank in Omagh and some people bank in Monaghan, depending on where they work or where their spouse lives and works, all of that. And the bank may be part of the creditor situation. How will the scheme be able to account for that border corridor, or people who have interests where the creditors are not, as you have said, they're UK based, but are based maybe in the 26 counties or Europe?
There's an important distinction, Chair. Currently, the South of Ireland doesn't have similar protections, so alignment, it will ensure enforceability. Many debts are owed to UK-wide creditors. Now you're talking specific to Monaghan. So without,
I'm using that as an example. In general, where they're not based across the water, so they're based somewhere else. How are we going to manage?
Yeah. So In the south, there are no protections, and this will bring protections for people living in the north of Ireland.
I get that, Ray, but how will we protect them in the circumstances where their creditors are in the south?
Now, I come in.
Maybe we can't, but I just want to know.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Well, the breathing space for Northern Ireland, we'll only be able to enforce it with creditors based in the UK. So our advice sector will have to do, them debts won't be part of the scheme, even if we brought in our own Northern Ireland legislation. So there will be, if the creditor is based outside in the Republic of Ireland, they won't be bound by this scheme. So
is that as a result of Brexit? That only occurs to me now.
No,
so would a scheme not have been? Is there any equivalent European scheme in any other jurisdiction across Europe?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
Not that we're aware of.
Okay, and are you saying that a dedicated scheme here wouldn't have been able to deal with that anyway? Is
Not
that
under
essentially
Northern
what you're
Ireland
saying?
legislation.
And that's only one example, but I would be very keen that any other variations that may arise are taken account of, because it's important. A couple more quick ones from me then before I move on, but I am also going to just
Could I just maybe mention just very quickly, there will be a consultation. Our officials will be working on that consultation, and that will lead to the further development of any Northern Ireland specific aspects. So, it's something that could either be ruled out and clarified during that process following the consultation, Chair.
And I'm taking then, as a result of those answers, that a lot of people now are banking with things, Monza and things like that, and long short-term loans and all of that. Will the scheme be able to touch any of those creditors, or is that a fault, a deficit in the scheme that we're going to have to look at again?
It will cover all UK-based creditors. Now, there's obviously other creditors in Northern Ireland, such as landlords or the credit union and so on. So it will cover all of those.
And what about those online banks, Monza, Revolut, those?
Every person, it covers personal debt, unsecured debt. So anybody with a personal loan or household bills, some government debts, and financial services debts. So anything comes under FCA. So
and they would still be UK based. Obviously, if it's not UK based, then it wouldn't cover that, Chair. But most of those examples that you've given would be UK based.
Okay. I'll do one more and I'll go to members then. I might pick up on one more if it's not covered by members. But I want to know then who will be operationally responsible for delivering the scheme on the ground. And I have mentioned the providers, the current providers. I'm thinking of Advice NI and people like that. Obviously pressed as it is to deliver, but well placed to deliver this type of advice. So who will be responsible for delivering the scheme on the ground here, and how will they be resourced with the additional resource to meet that?
Okay, if I maybe pick up and then I'll pass over to Patricia or Anne. So there are a number of aspects there, Chair. First of all, they are independent debt advisors that are funded through Department for Communities. They will require some training in this area so that they can advise and signpost people in crisis debt to the scheme. Now, the scheme will actually be operated, and this is all in development, but it'll be operated through the Insolvency Service for England and Wales through their platform, and there'll be a referral across to them. Patricia, do you want to pick up in a bit more detail there?
Yes, the breathing space is the standard in mental health crisis breathing space. So key delivery partners, as you say, Chair, is our advice sector. The whole policy intent is to engage with debt advice early, so that somebody doesn't end up with a bankruptcy solution, bankruptcy or insolvency, which is what this scheme is about. So our debt advice sector are key. So Advice NI, and anybody that's regulated under FCA to provide debt advice. So we'll be working with our funded advice service, so Advice NI and locally community based, but there'll be other debt advisors in Northern Ireland that sit outside that possibly charge. So the access route is through an FCA registered debt advisor that's puts them onto a breathing space for the standard breathing space. You can't access it unless you get regulated debt advice. And that's to ensure the creditor gets, it's to protect the creditor. The idea is higher chance of repayment. So delivery will be advice sector. The mental health crisis breathing space delivery partner will be, we need to work with our Department of Health colleagues because that's a different access route, an alternative route. So they will be key to certifying that. So they are a key player as well. When you're in a mental health crisis breathing space and it's certified, and we're working with our Department of Health colleagues to understand who that might be, then you don't have to engage with debt advice because it's seen to be in crisis.
And will there be any issue in relation to the detail of the legislation or the instrument in relation to the description of approved mental health professional. We don't have that exact equivalent role here. So will that create any difficulties, or is that something that you'll be able to address?
That'll be worked through the development of the legislation and during the consultation. We've already begun engagement with DOH colleagues to actually clarify, what the equivalent or what an alternative Northern Ireland specific and bespoke. And I think picking up on the costs, there are costs that are known that we've factored in, referring to the platform there through the Insolvency Service England and Wales. So there are one-off costs there that we've taken advice on and provide good value for money, and anticipated annual operating costs of around £45,000 per year. But there will be other costs that are identified as the policy develops, and we can update the committee on those as they become more aware of them.
And just so I get a sense that, are you saying in a way in relation to the delivery, the sector's already out there, this will be another tool at their disposal in a sense, and the sector will, however, you have also said that we're not seeing enough people coming for that advice.
Right.
We're hoping this instrument will drive more people to taking the advice. How will the sector be resourced to pick up that additional traffic? So we're driving more rightly, and I want to say that I think the scheme is a good idea and important. We're rightly trying to encourage more people to come forward. The advice sector needs to be resourced to meet the increased demand.
Well, we currently don't have any evidence that it isn't sufficiently resourced. I mean, certainly, whenever we engage and monitor closely the work that Advice and I would take forward on behalf of the department.
But Ray, I'm talking about the increase.
So
I accept what you're saying.
Chair, it's something that we can monitor and keep under review. But we will also, as the scheme is developed, identify any additional costs. But currently, there is that independent advice in place, and they will be able to signpost people in crisis to this.
Okay, and we commit to working with you and appreciate that. So I'm going to come to members now. I'm coming to Kelly, and then I'm going to go to Mark. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you very much. As you say, it is a good news story, so it'll give people breathing space. I'm particularly interested in that mental health piece. In order for someone to avail of the scheme, I'm just thinking of somebody, a mental health patient, somebody that's in crisis. Will they have to apply? And even asking their mental health professional to confirm their treatment could actually be counterproductive, because when they're in crisis, and quite often, whether they're in debt or whatever, it makes no difference. They're in crisis. They can't think, clearly on that type of stuff. Just wondering, what's the process? Have they identified that in Westminster of how this will work?
So in Westminster, in England and Wales, it's a mental health specialist, and it's a nominated person that undertakes that assessment and would make the referral. We're working with DOH to actually clarify how that would operate in Northern Ireland. There are two aspects. I mean, quite often individuals who find themselves in crisis debt can develop mental health problems, and on the other side, those who have mental health problems or end up in a mental health crisis can end up having debt crisis problems as well. So, clearly those who are receiving treatment it would automatically qualify, but there would be a referral system through DOH, and that's being clarified. Okay. But obviously they may not be receiving treatment, they may be on all of that needs to be worked through.
Okay. I think it would be very important if we can impress upon our Department of Health colleagues that this is an exercise that is undertaken with the patient early on, because
Can I come in? So there's a few. We have different mental health structures and professionals, and the Mental Health Act's not exactly the same. So we need to make sure it's legally and operationally effective here, and we need to look at the situation in the community. The crisis in the hospital, there's different settings, who's appropriate in the hospital and the community to relate to our structures. So Department of Health have mapped that out, and we're going back to Treasury, and they're going to be updating their committee on this as well, and we're working closely with them to make sure it's deliverable here and the workforce implications for them. But the person themselves can be nominated point of contact, can do that for them, and they won't be able to engage. They don't have to engage with that advisor.
Okay.
Can
I bring it on?
Yes, it was just to be aware as well that unlike the standard breathing space, individuals accessing the mental health crisis breathing space don't need to engage with the debt advice before protections apply. So this reflects the fact that the individuals experiencing a mental health crisis may not be in a position to engage with debt advice at that stage, so that is recognised as part of the process.
The other thing that I was wanted to ask about is the definition of the creditor. The qualifying debts we have in your paper, but we also have the ones that it excludes. I was just wondering, for Northern Ireland's point of view, I'd noticed that social funds and equivalent Northern Ireland schemes such as discretionary support are excluded, debts incurred through fraud, but I was just wondering where there has been error, is that excluded? You know, when benefits are being reclaimed back from a person, you know, sometimes that error can put a person into a crisis debt.
Can I come in there?
Yes.
It's really only if it's, say, a court fine or criminal. So if it's an error, but we will check that. But I wouldn't be understand if it's an error. If it's an error, that it would be. It's more that if it's done through fraud or through criminal, you know, debts that have incurred through that. But
you talk about fraud and error here, and I know that
we probably need to take that away.
Just it's the error part. I think it'd be a bit hard.
We would probably be engaging with the debt management service within the department as well, because obviously they will be able to define what is fraud and what is error in that context.
Oh yes, if I think it'd be probably pretty easy if the department has recognised there was an error made, and the person would be communicated in that way.
As well, Chair, you know, the error could work in both directions. You could have someone that was eligible for the scheme who may become ineligible, or those that aren't able could actually become able to access. So, you know, it would play out in both directions, really.
And the last one I have, Chair, is just Scotland obviously have a different process to England and Wales. Have you looked at the differences, and is there any way that we could get maybe a copy of just something that highlights what the difference that Scotland have done? Yeah. And is there anything in the Scotland one that maybe it could apply in Northern Ireland, if you could supply that maybe just in writing or something? Yeah.
The team have undertaken obviously that landscape piece, so we can certainly provide that to committee. I think probably one of the aspects that is different in Scotland is that they do have the statutory repayment plan element, but in England and Wales there's plans that basically has been paused in England and Wales, and there's plans to take forward a review, and pending the outcome of that review it could lead to a plan or it may not, you know. But I think, you know, the scheme as currently presented, you know, the benefits to the individual and indeed the benefits to the creditor as opposed to bankruptcy or insolvency are really strong, you know.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Can I just come in there? With Scotland, there is a few differences, and we will lay them out for you. Only they don't freeze, their breathing space part doesn't freeze interest charges or some enforcement. But I think it's important they had their system well ahead of breathing space, so part of ours is broadly equivalent to Scotland, but I think Wales gives the same protections, then it'd be cheaper and cost effective, so it may be similar, but we can lay that out in a sort of comparison. But they had to put the infrastructure in place. And whatnot.
Understood. Thank you.
Tommy call Arash Arish Guji Dura Agus Mark Dorkin. Lana Mark,
Kelly beat me to the punch there. It was for clarity around protections in case of error, and there is fraud, and you'd mentioned there that if there's criminal fraud and then there is error, but there's most of it sort of falls in between, where it'll be described as fraud by the department when it has been an error. And I think particularly in the likes of carers allowance, where people have overpayments and incur debts of thousands of pounds for an overpayment of £1 or £2 a week, it's absolutely nuts. Just in terms of that as well, protections, does LPS figure in this at all? Or
yes, rates, and we have engaged with government creditors before we went to the executive, so they're well aware of the impact. We still have to work with them, so rates, debt management rates and enforcement will also touch upon EJO and courts here. So there are some of the Northern Ireland differences operationally, but so we will have to put equivalent pauses because rates is the same as council tax.
Yeah.
So yes, it's be included.
NCP penalty charge notices for parking fines and what have you.
Yeah, Department for Infrastructure will be involved as well. Any sort of arrears, anything the person's got person in debt will be included. But we'll be coming back to yourselves with the detail with the regulations to see what sits outside what's in England Wales regulations, that we have this different Northern Ireland, we have different, so we will be coming back.
Yeah, as the regulations are brought forward, there will be nuances that will need to be tailored and be Northern Ireland specific, given the differences across the jurisdictions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mark agus tá mé go go dtí an lás ceathirlach inis. Cathy,
I just want to go back to the cross-border issue that the Chair had mentioned, and I understand what the response and the answer, but I'm just thinking of those constituents that we have who would be in those cross-border areas. Like, it would be very normal for a constituent in South Armagh to have a creditor that's in the south. Has there been any discussion with the Irish government in this, or the the equivalent department on that kind of cross-border working aspect?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, what we're aware of is that there is no similar scheme operating in the south, so the protections wouldn't be provided. So, in other words, if someone is living in Northern Ireland but has Irish-based creditors, they wouldn't have those protections. But if if they're living in Northern Ireland and it's UK-based creditors, they would have the protections. But that's something that we could maybe take away and just get a bit more clarification on.
There is a cross-border panel, I've forgotten what the name, we do engage with things so we will bring that to them to make sure counterparts are updated and see if because advice will be given to each side of the border. The debt advisor will. I think
communication, either way, communication would be key, so that people living and working north or south of the border are clear about the scheme and the parameters under which it operates.
And again, like I said, I do understand that there's the differences there, but I just think it would be a missed opportunity not to raise that if there is something in the pipeline or there is workings in the south as well. So we'd appreciate that. The other aspect around the mental health aspect of it as well, I think that's it's really important and it's really vital work that's going on. Do you think, and I know you mentioned that there has been working with the Department of Health, and unfortunately I've seen this before when it comes to education and two departments maybe not able to work together when it's really vital that they do for these certain schemes. Do you think the Department of Health will be able to come up with a solution that health professional is that key person? We know how under pressure and how under-resourced they are, and it's the same across the board. But are you getting positivity back that this will be in the pipeline?
It's a number of things there. So in England, it's a certified, England and Wales, it's a certified registered healthcare individual. In Northern Ireland, it may be, or it could be, a slightly different approach. And the Department of Health Minister has given a commitment to work with communities on this. So there has already been strong engagement, and we would be confident that engagement will continue. As I say, there are benefits and wider benefits for someone experiencing mental health crisis to have these protections, which are obviously in the interests of Department of Health and Department of Communities.
And when it does come to the mental health aspect of it, it's so often the community and voluntary sector who are picking up the pieces there, with services, and it's very often the referrals will be made to a community and voluntary sector organisation as well. So, it's vital not just within the statutory aspect of it, but also that sector as well. Just one other, if I have time, Chair, just one other. Some of the figures that were in the briefing paper were quite shocking. That 11% of the population in the north needs debt advice. How does that figure compare with other areas? And then another figure again that stood out was the 2% who need that advice are only receiving it. How does that compare, or is there any plan in place to try and, I know you mentioned communication, but is that built into this plan?
So it compares less favourably with England and Wales. The relative percentages are lower in England and Wales. So it is a matter of concern in the Money and Pension Service. Go ahead.
Can I come in here, because I looked up the percentages, because we're 11%, but actually England's 14%, and Scotland's 12% in need of debt advice. Wales is 12.6%. We're 11%. So the need for debt advice is much similar across across the board. And the 2% is only the 2% we know that go to our funded debt advice service in Northern Ireland that we fund through the department. We don't have an idea of if anybody is going to others. So, but we do know that people don't go to debt advice early, which is why we did create a debt fund. We're doing other things to try and get people into debt advice early. But 2% is what we're dealing with through our funded debt advice service.
Huge gap in data then as well, so we actually don't really have any idea.
No, we don't know this.
According to MOPS, they say many don't seek support until the situation is, has escalated and enforcement is imminent. So unfortunately, that I think that's consistent across the whole of the UK in terms of why people are maybe not coming forward. But I know that Advice NI are very proactive in terms of promoting debt advice, and we work with the sector. And obviously, when this comes into play, there'll have to be a communications exercise done for both the debt advice sector, government departments, creditors, and of course the public as well.
Yeah, I think that communications piece in this is going to be vital.
There's no doubt that 11% is too high, and 2% is too low.
Yeah.
So closing that gap and narrowing the gap would be really important through the advice communication.
Yeah, in a second, Kelly. So I'm just picking up on the Deputy Chair's point there around that 11%. How are we measuring that? Is that self-identified, or is that measured from statistics that we're aware of?
Yeah, it's the money and pensions
Money View survey.
Survey.
That was the 2025 Money View survey. That was the Money and Pension Service.
Yeah, because I'm just a wee bit concerned that we know people are not coming forward in the numbers they need to. Maybe they're not identifying in terms of the survey either. So maybe that 11% figure is also under what other jurisdictions see. So I'm just a wee concerned at that, but it's something worth a go ahead.
It's Money and Pension Service have a UK strategic responsibility with a financial wellbeing strategy to do the survey across Northern Ireland. I haven't got the figures here, but we make sure there's enough Northern Ireland representation on that survey, and we go through our statisticians because we're funded for our debt levy based on that percentage. So we're keen to make sure that it is. And so it is robust as we can, or we see it and we send it to our statisticians, but maybe
it's only as robust as people are prepared to share. Yeah, okay, and that's it. Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Just very quickly, just following up on the Deputy Chair's question about the communication sort of strategy that can go out from this. Across other departments, I'm thinking in particular of education, it has living, I can never remember the name of this programme that they have in schools at secondary level, Living for Life and whatever it's called. And quite often I hear complaints that there isn't enough about money management and how to manage rent, how to manage a mortgage, all that. So is there any plan, or could there be a plan in the communication strategy that other departments have to think of ways to educating particular young people so that before they get into debt, they at least know what the solutions can be or where the help is? I'm just wondering if that would be part of the communications.
We were also inputting last year to the UK financial inclusion strategy, because financial inclusion sits outside. A lot of the lever sits, like you say, financial education. So it's credit unions under Department for Economy, and we have set up a cross-departmental financial inclusion group so that we keep in touch with update on all of the things that we're doing, like Department for Economy and the credit union consultation, Department of Education, what they're doing in schools, Department of Finance for the banking round table. So I think we would use opportunity to bring that to that group to try and get it.
As well as that, the money and pension service maps, they have a direct link in with CCA on the curriculum. So they've got Learning for Life and Work. I know that work has been taken forward there, but they would be able to brief on that separately.
Okay, thank you. A couple of hopefully brief enough ones for me just to wrap us up. How confident are you with given that it has to go through within in terms of the Treasury, you have the legislative timetable across the water, approvals across all the jurisdictions. How confident are the department that the scheme can be delivered within the current Assembly mandate?
$6 million question. Well, obviously we are confident, and I think that comes from the executive endorsement in principle to take the scheme forward. So my officials are working at pace with Treasury and really very rapidly to develop and bring forward the legislation, which will obviously need to be scrutinised and come through. So we would be confident, Patricia.
Yeah, well, we can't put timescales because there's dependencies, because we need to do a consultation. Treasury would do the consultation. We need to work out some of the differences that we've said today as well. But we're moving at pace to try and get the consultation and consultation responses.
I think as well, Chair, Treasury have a finite time window, so there's kind of reciprocal pressures to work at pace to actually deliver on this. So they have a finite time scale that they're working on, and we're supporting them in that as well.
Okay, thank you. And then, following on from that, then when can committee expect a clear and definitive implementation timetable, including consultation, legislative milestones, and go live?
Well, at the moment we've mapped the difference in the policy. So we're giving them our approval steps for our governance here. For your, we'll be coming back to here. There's going to be a draft statutory instrument that would have to go assembly approval. So to work back, and the consultation would be coming here first, and then they have their steps. So they're going to come back to us with indicative joint, because their time scales might be different. So we don't have a. But we should be able to come back in a few months here.
Yeah,
a few months won't be that long.
Absolutely.
The next step is to identify the differences and then work on with them on the consultation, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And a late rally from Andy there.
As always, Chair. Just curious, in your briefing note you state there during the moratorium period, most charges and interest would be paused. Is there anything specific you're aware of that won't be paused?
Yeah. So there is things like court fines if court action has been started. So when we say most, it's most time. So the court, I had it down here, court action has already started. Really, there was secured. There was something else, and I just forgot to write it down here. But it's mainly sort of court action that's already started, because it's not worth stopping it in that period of time. Is the one that's sticking to my mind, but there's a few other ones that just stick in my mind. But
it's been couched as most. It's anticipated that this scheme will cover the vast majority, but there could be a circumstance under which it wouldn't, that is not foreseen. So that's why we're saying most. But the scheme is designed to tackle this issue and provide those protections.
Yeah, like evictions and stuff would have to pause. Yeah, evictions would be picked back up again. So I think that's short term. If something's already through a claim of court, then it's that started. Then it's too costly to stop that. But if it's post-court, you don't start new court action, and we need to work through them sort of enforcement for Northern Ireland with their courts.
It'd just be useful to get
just nuances,
get information on that, so we're very much aware as to what will or won't.
Yeah.
And just pivoting it back across, I know there's been some commentary on this around the figures, the 11%, and then you'd obviously highlighted that it is much higher in other parts of the United Kingdom, and the 2% figure. Do you have any detail around the numbers of those accessing support in other parts of the United Kingdom? Is that higher or lower?
Well, I just don't have it here at the moment.
We don't have the figures. We can confirm that. And in fact, probably a short paper for committee setting out a summary of the data and comparisons across the UK.
It'd be useful to know that, to see if there's anything being done in the rest of the United Kingdom where it's encouraging more people to avail of that advice that could be looked at for here. And then it obviously comes back to that piece. Obviously, this wider breathing space is important, but what is the department doing in the current time to try to increase that 2%? And I appreciate, obviously, there is that caveat that most people don't approach for that advice until crisis point, but how can we obviously head that off at the pass and try and encourage more people to come forward instead of leaving it to the advice sector and advice NI? I know they do important work there, but how can the department be more proactive?
I'm say with the integrated fund.
Yeah, so the integrated advice partnership, where the Minister recently announced that the funding for that will continue. So that means that local community debt advisors are actually going out to, for example, GP surgeries or libraries or different places. So they're actually going to meet people where they are and give them the debt advice rather than wait until they come. So we've found that has been very proactive, and we can give you more information on that.
That's really about increasing referral pathways early, so to deal with your social supermarkets or food banks where people are going in need, they know to go to the debt advice and increase. So that's one of the elements of departments.
I believe the proportion, the percentage accessing the debt advice for those in crisis is higher in England and Wales, but we'll double check and confirm that figure in a paper form.
And does the department have that internal cross-departmental comms plan so that makes sure that those initiatives that the Minister for Communities is bringing forward, that all departments and all elements of the system know? For example, you mentioned credit unions that sit across economy, so that all areas know that if an individual is identified, that there is support available there for them, and we can then get them timely access to that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. In terms of that, communications will be a key issue going forward. But as Patricia alluded to, in terms of the group that we already have established across government departments to look at the financial inclusion and well-being, we will ensure that we keep departments up to date and communicate with them as we move things along.
Okay, I appreciate that. Cheers, Chair.
Very briefly, Kelly.
Very quickly, you mentioned there about evictions. I know that the department has a very clear stance on evictions, antisocial behaviour and various things, and one of them, I think one of the clauses or one of the considerations is where there's extensive amount of debt, rent debt. So I'm just wondering, how do the two, could you have a look at that, how the two pieces of legislation marry together? Because on one hand, the department is looking at a piece that says actually the eviction will proceed because of the debt that's owed. However, if this prevents the eviction, then...
Well, this scheme would actually bring in the protections of the 60 days for outside the mental health element. For the mental health element, it would actually bring in a protection for the duration of treatment plus 30 days that doesn't currently exist. So
there might be a clash there with what the departmental intentions are with particularly severe issues with renters, with the private landlord sectors. It might be worth just checking that, because that means then that somebody, although they could be evicted within a fortnight, it's actually 60 days and then potentially a fortnight.
It's really referring to the link to eviction rather than the
It's just how that would work together.
Arrears, if you like.
Eviction can't happen in the breathing space period, so we do need to work with our colleagues in the housing, and that's one of the regulations that it'll touch upon. Then we'll touch upon the equivalent private
rented sector.
Tenancy that we will have to work within our own department to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So listen, I think that has been a really good session, I have to say. Very, very clear that a lot of work has gone, a lot of thought has gone into this. There are some issues that maybe you weren't able to answer, but you said that clearly and committed to coming back, and that's all as a assistance committee we expect is that commitment to work, because I think members have raised some really interesting issues, and I take it that I do note that those are being taken on board. So that's how we help. So I want to thank you for the session in that respect. I do want to just on a final note just to say that issue of people who live in the north, the Good Friday Agreement fully entitles them to live and to be in the north and work in the south and all of that. So there may be an issue here, and I want to just give you some idea. When I was CURE spokesperson, research had indicated that there's up to 30,000 CUREs across the border, and I'm giving these as examples to set out. CUREs cross the border on a daily basis. We heard previously in the department, again, tens of thousands of people may not qualify for winter pension because they were from here but now live. So there's a large cohort of people there, and what we can't do, and I don't want to see any delay in the scheme, but what we can't do is hardwire potential discrimination into anything that we're doing here. It has to take account of it, and even if it's not possible to fix it, then we have to see how we're going to overcome those barriers, because Andy mentioned the credit union. Many people along that border corridor are in a credit union in the south. So I mean, there's inherent linkages there, and we cannot see a significant cohort of our population being left out of these important protections. So I know you've taken on board already. I just want to leave that point.
Yeah, we can also give a commitment, though. We'll engage with our colleagues in the south to discuss this.
No, and that's very welcome. Ray Morris, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with what you said there, but could we find out some way of putting pressure on Irish government to actually get something in place across the other side of the border that would be complementary to what we're trying to do here? I mean, could we find something out about that?
100%. Yeah, whatever the solution, I think that's
they have long term. They have like bankruptcy and insolvency solutions, but as far as we're aware, there's nothing short term like this.
We'll take that away and engage with colleagues in the south on that specific issue.
Yeah, okay. Well, listen, thank you. We'll pick up on some follow-up actions. Look forward to working with you in relation to this, and I appreciate the work you have already done and your expertise that you brought to the committee today, and your commitments that you've given us in relation to some of the items. Thank you very much.
Chair, thank you, committee.
Thank you. Okay, members. So I'll just check with the clerk. We have a number of issues.
A number of issues we'll take up. We have those noted, Chair. We'll then correspond with the department to follow up on those.
We'll forward those on to the department. Anything else members want to indicate as a follow-up action? I do think that was a really useful session and good work. You know, you feel like you're making some progress there in terms of a two-way flow of information.
Sure, I'm just wondering, is there maybe a piece we could get raised to do? You know, this is obviously cutting across for those who are registered in the United Kingdom in terms of the creditors. Is there a piece that they could do just so that we could have cognizance of, you know, how many creditors are lenders that operate that are not UK based, and what the rules are around that, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Members contact. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, members. That's very useful, and look forward to that coming back to us again. That's an important piece of work. Moving then on to our first SL1 for today, and it's agenda item 7, SL1, the draft Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations 2026. And the SL1 was received on the 24th of April, and the relevant papers can be found starting at page 140 of your meeting pack, members. So just to inform you that the statutory rule will introduce a discretion to enable NILGOSC as scheme manager to apply exemptions from statutory requirements. NILGOSC has stated that it cannot include the MacLeod remedy in the 2025-26 annual benefit statements for about 400 members, and may also face compliance issues in 26-27 for some members. ABS is due to factors beyond its control, namely pending guidance on pension credits related to divorce cases and software development delays for club transfer cases expected in early 2027. This SL1 is subject to negative procedure, and its proposed operational date is the 31st of August 2026. Can I ask, therefore, our members' content that the draft Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations will be considered again on the 20th of May? Our members' content. Thank you.
Can we ask just in advance of that 28th of May, just for a little more clarity, why the MacLeod judgment isn't being provided? Because for those who would fall into that, that could have a significant impact on their pension payments out.
Yeah, and I would like certainly more information on what the software development delays for club transfer cases and what impact that might be. Would be useful for members content with those. Yeah, thank you. So members should therefore note that the committee will next consider this SL1 as agreed on 20th of May, alongside a summary of any comments and feedback received via Citizen Space. The committee team will issue a call for views on the SL1 using the standard survey on Citizen Space from today, 7th of May 2026. Alongside this, the SL1 and any relevant papers from the department will be published on the committee website and notified to relevant stakeholders alongside the relevant deadline where appropriate. Are members agreed with that?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you. Do members have any further comments at this stage? No? Yeah. Yeah, so just to note that if members require clarification, officials can be invited. So yeah, we can look for that. Thank you. Okay, members, moving on to agenda item 8, SL1, Universal Credit, Personal Independence Payment, Jobseekers Allowance and Employment and Support Allowance. Decisions and appeals in brackets amendment regulations NI 2026. The SL1 was received on the 1st of May, and the relevant papers are to be found at page 199 of your meeting pack. The clerk's memo in relation to the SL1 can be found at page 3 of your tabled papers. Please note that the Minister and Department have requested that consideration of this SL1 is expedited and within a shortened time frame. So we do have officials to brief us here this morning. So we are joined from the department by John Noble, who's Principal Social Security Policy Legislation and Decision, Patricia Quinn, who is Staff Officer in Social Security Policy Legislation and Decision, and John Lahern, who's Deputy Principal in PIP Operations. You're very welcome this morning, and I'll not go through any of the detail or in terms of the purpose, as you're here to do that for committee members. So if you please take us through the detail, and then we can get to questions from members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for giving us the opportunity to attend this morning in relation to the SL1 for these regulations. I'm attending this morning along with my colleague Patricia Quinn, who works alongside me in the policy and legislation side in the department, and John Loughran, who is from the department's PIP operations. The proposed statutory rule amends the Universal Credit, Personal Independence Payment, Jobseekers Allowance and Employment and Support Allowance Decision and Appeals Regulations, Northern Ireland 2016, to create a new ground for supersession, which will grant the discretion to the Department to extend awards of personal independence payment. The ground will be limited to extending awards of benefit only where necessary to safeguard the efficient administration of PIP. Safeguarding the efficient administration of PIP means an extension may be applied in limited circumstances to meet potential future challenges, such as those not limited to national emergencies. So, for example, in the event of a war or health crisis such as the recent COVID-19 pandemic, requiring the extension of awards to ensure claimants' benefits remains in payment, as well as more specific, maybe administrative issues such as a systems outage, serious resource limitations, which means that full assessments cannot be undertaken. It is important to note the amendment, which is technical in nature, cannot be used by a decision maker to remove entitlement or reduce the length of award. Furthermore, it cannot be used to increase or decrease the rate of personal independence payment a person would receive. As with all supersession decisions in personal independence payment, extensions made under this power will carry a right of appeal following a mandatory reconsideration. Extending award lengths enables people to receive PIP payment for longer and protects the Department's ability to administer PIP sustainability. Decision makers may still make awards for shorter or longer periods depending on the individual circumstances. The committee will be aware of the very particular challenges the Department faces in timelines relating to Social Security parity legislation and our legal obligations in that regard. Unfortunately, we have not been able to share with the committee a draft of the proposed statutory rule and explanatory memorandum until now, as required under the new procedures introduced on the 5th of January of this year. The Department intends to delay this proposed statutory rule on the 11th of May. This is to ensure that the regulations can come into operation on the 2nd of June 2026 in alignment with the correspondence Department for Work and Pensions regulations while adhering to the 21-day rule. The Department has conducted the usual screening exercises in relation to this statutory rule. There's no rural, regulatory or data protection impacts were identified. A Section 75 screening was also carried out, which concluded that the provision would not have any significant implications for equality of opportunity or good relations, and that a full equality impact assessment was not necessary. The Department has also concluded the amendment will have no detrimental impact on children. This technical amendment can only be considered a positive measure, as it will ensure that there is legislative cover to extend PIP awards as and when required. We would be very happy to take any questions from you.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I know you touched on it there, but you threw it quite quickly. But just can I ask you to draw out a little more detail about why the committee's been asked to consider this within a shortened time frame?
We obviously have been working on these proposals. Obviously, the notification comes late from the Department for Work and Pensions, and therefore,
when did it come?
We got the final sort of draft from that we were agreeing to then go to our Department Solicitor's Office on the 2nd of April. Obviously, then we engaged with Department Solicitor's Office to verify the statutory rule, and then obviously considering the constraints of the 21-day and the date it's being brought into effect, shortened obviously the period of time for coming to yourselves, to the committee, and we can only apologise for that.
Okay, and do you see any risk to effective scrutiny in relation to this case in terms of that shortened time frame? Because it's something that we're constantly trying to battle with here.
Yeah, we obviously, as I said there in my opening statement, we see this as a positive measure, obviously about extending awards. It is obviously maybe important to note that in Northern Ireland, 87% of PIP awards are paid for 4 years or more anyway, so we don't actually envisage this change will have any significant impact on PIP claimants.
Okay, and how will the Department ensure that claimants understand when and why their awards are extended, and how it will mitigate risks around confusion, delayed reassessment or failure to report changes?
I'll check with John here, but my understanding is with anybody, it's obviously if there's an extension or that the claimant would be notified, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, they would also have an opportunity to do a mandatory reconsideration if they wish to do so, but they would be notified if it has been extended.
Yeah, and that's fair, and I would hope that would happen. However, I do have a bit of a concern around, for example, the Carers Allowance one. I think in that case, one of the factors was where there was overpayments made. People weren't notified, so it's always something that's worth keeping under close review. But thank you for that. I'll come to Kelly then.
No, thank you very much for this, and giving the department that permission to extend is worthwhile. I just wanted to ask, Pip, we know that when it comes to the end of the period of someone's period that they've been awarded, and then the renewal, or we call it renewal, but it's the new application comes through, it can take a significant amount of time at the moment. Will this legislation allow the department to extend beyond if the waiting time to get reassessed or assessment done is over a year?
This obviously rule will allow a decision maker to obviously extend it, looking at the information they have in front of them. So obviously if they feel it's appropriate that there has been no change of circumstances, maybe perhaps with the claimant, they would be able to do that automatically without having to go through that lengthy process of another assessment. However, probably if there is a decision maker looking at it and there's maybe been a change of circumstances, then obviously it would still go into the process. That would be obviously dealt with in the normal manner. This just allows a decision maker to say, okay, I'm happy to progress this and extend it for 3 years. Okay,
I'm just thinking of the instances. Keep me right. I might be wrong on this because I usually have my caseworker that tells me all of these particulars. If after a year of waiting, does the PIP cut off?
No.
No.
Whenever someone gets an award of PIP, and they hit the stage where their case is up for award review, the department's commitment is that they will continue to get paid until the new decision has been made.
Okay, because I thought at a couple of cases where it had gone on for a while, but that was a few years ago.
Can I just add something? I mean, this ground that we're introducing here can only be used in exceptional circumstances. Yeah. So, like as John mentioned, COVID-19. I think you probably all remember whenever COVID hit, we had to extend all our benefits because, for fear of them running out and people losing their money. So this can only be used in exceptional circumstances.
I think that some of the times that people have to wait is exceptional for them. It's a bit difficult, but no, it's the opportunities there for a paper-based exercise to be used as opposed to, which is good. I wish we'd do it for the blue badges as well, but there we go. I just wanted to be sure that this legislation enabled that because emergencies happen. Unfortunately, it's becoming more regular now, that extension and that length of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And who will oversee, just touching on Kelly's question, and who will oversee the use of the new discretionary power and what mechanisms will be in place to monitor its use?
Our operational colleagues obviously would be operating this obviously on a day-to-day basis. So obviously we do have regular contact with our operational colleagues. So if obviously they flag any issues to us, we will obviously look at it. But our operational colleagues will be fully implementing it. And if there is any issues, they will obviously raise it with ourselves to consider.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Chair, no.
Pardon?
No one else is.
No, I don't think there's anyone else. I just wonder, and this is not a criticism at all, but it's something I think we have to guard against as a committee, given the amount of parity measures that are coming across now at very short notice and very short effective scrutiny window. But are we being basically asked to pass this one on the basis of parity and timing rather than a fully evidenced local assessment?
Well, as I said earlier, we obviously deem it as a positive measure, and as I also pointed out, a significant amount of our current PIP claimants, already have a 4-year or more award. So we had obviously will be looking at that when we're actually with looking at the policy changes to see if there's any detrimental impact to those people. So in our evaluation of that, we deem it's a positive move. But obviously once it gets implemented, we will obviously continue to monitor that. And again, as I said earlier, we apologise. Obviously, as a department, we would like to come to you as quick as we can with some of these changes, but they do come in at quick speed to ourselves. So we're working to make sure that nobody in Northern Ireland is disadvantaged if we didn't bring it forward. And so again, I can only apologise, but we always would do an endeavour to come and bring things to you before.
And I really do appreciate that, and that is really to appreciate. And we certainly don't want to see anyone disadvantaged either. So we're in a similar bind to yourselves in that respect. So I appreciate your attendance here today, and thank you for taking questions and queries from committee members. Appreciate your assistance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members. So is there any follow-up action or any additional information members would? Okay. So then, can I then confirm that? Just let me check where. So, yeah, no follow-up actions at this point in time. Are members content to consider the proposed statutory rule within the shortened time frame? If I can just confirm, members content that we consider it within the shortened time frame? Yeah. If I can just confirm, therefore, that the universal credit, personal independence payment, job seekers allowance, and employment and support allowance, brackets decisions and appeal, brackets amendment, regulations, NI 2026 will be considered again on the 20th of May.
Yep.
Yeah, and remind members that there is a shortened time frame, but that does not preclude the committee from issuing a call for views. However, in this instance, this will require the committee making a decision on the SL1 proposal today and before responses are received. Any responses will contribute to committee scrutiny at the statutory rule stage rather than the SL1 stage. So members should note that the committee will next consider this on the 20th of May, alongside, at that point, a summary of any comments and feedback received via Citizen Space. The committee team will issue a call for views on the SL1 using the standard survey on Citizen Space from today, 7th of May, and the call for views for each will close at midnight on the 20th of May 2026. Alongside this, the SL1 and any relevant papers from the department will be published on the committee website and notified to relevant stakeholders where appropriate. Are members agreed with that? All of that? Members should further note that the department intends to lay the rule on the 11th of May 2026. Committee is asked to indicate whether it is content or not content for the department to proceed to make the statutory rule. Therefore, can I ask, are members content that the department proceed to make the statutory rule?
Yeah.
Yeah. Members content, thank you. Do members have any further comments at this stage? Members content to move on? Okay. Moving on then, members, to agenda item 9, matters arising. You've been provided there with a summary table of matters arising at page 216. We've only a few responses to consider this week, and I'll ask for comments as I go through those individually from 9.2 to 9.3. So 9.2 is a response from the Equality and Social Justice Committee in the Welsh Parliament, advising that it is not considered the UK Pensions Schemes Bill, but that an LCM was considered by the Legislation, Justice and Constitutional Affairs Committee and the Local Government and Housing Committee for members' information. Do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise in relation to that item?
Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Item 9.3 is from the Department for Economy, advising that department officials would be content to brief our committee on the Good Jobs Bill after they have first briefed the Committee for the Economy, most likely to be in June. I think that's fair enough, to be honest, but I want to ask, do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise? No. Thank you, members. Therefore, that concludes matters arising today. So moving on to agenda item 10, correspondence. So members, unlike for matters arising in terms of the items of correspondence, I'll proceed through this list in bundles and only draw attention to certain items. I'd ask if you wish to draw out or highlight any other item, or indeed comment on an item that I have drawn out, please use the reference in the memo starting on page 225 of the pack. The first bundle that we're going to cover is items 10.2 to 10.6. The first item I wanted to draw out or a couple of items here is 10.4 and 10.5 are from the Clerk to the Committee for Education regarding raised briefing papers on the Holiday Hunger Bill and the Irish Medium Education Bill. The Clerk has advised that the Committee for Education has commenced committee stage of both bills and requested views from statutory committees in relation to both bills with a deadline of the 15th of May. So I think you were looking in there.
Yeah, just on the, well, both bills, obviously I'm involved through the Education Committee, but the Holiday Hunger Bill specifically I think really has a lot of crossover in the context of the anti-poverty strategy. whilst it's the legislation sits within education in terms of free school meals, I think the impacts of this bill will be fundamental to the first steps, I suppose, in trying to lift some children out of poverty. So I think it's really important that we do engage on that particular bill, just like I say, because of the major connections with the anti-poverty strategy. So I'm not sure if that's something that we can do, is look into that specifically.
Yeah. Okay, well, I was going to ask if members were content for the committee team to review the bills for intersection with DFC areas of responsibility, and you're highlighting a very significant one there, and draft a committee response for consideration if appropriate.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Take that away, Chair.
Yeah. Agreed, members. Thank you. Okay, do members want to draw out any other items in 10.2 to 10.6? No. Thank you, member.
Right, no,
go ahead, Kelly. Yeah.
10.4, in fact, 10.4 I agree. If we had had our briefing about the anti-poverty strategy, we might have had more to put into that. But 10.5, that support for language, it would be useful to ask the committee what role does the Department of Education or the Education Authority have in ensuring that support for language is provided. It feeds in not only to the Irish Medium Education Bill, but our thoughts for the future for sign language.
Yeah, so
it's raising to that committee just to say to them that we're interested, like because communities with language, what is the commitment within the department to the promotion and support for language, particularly Irish language? I know it's not relevant for that bill, but it's because we're also interested due to the future of sign language.
Yep, members content. Yes, Kathy, go ahead.
Just in relation to Kelly's point there, I agree with you, Kelly, on that there is that crossover. This bill is specifically around the workforce, and we actually heard from the department yesterday in terms of the statutory obligation for Irish medium. Okay. So it's probably a good time, because they have stated that they are working on an Irish language strategy for education. So it's perfect timing actually on that. It's supposed to be finished by summer 2027. So we should get in now on that with the sign language stuff.
Okay, thank you. Members content. Just checking, Melissa, were you indicating there? I wasn't sure. No, okay, thank you, Melissa. Okay, thank you, members, for that. So moving on then to the second bundle, which includes items from 10.7 to 10.10. The item that I wanted to draw out was that there's an invitation there from children in Northern Ireland to attend the launch of their new report, Left Out, Disabled Children Rights and Experiences in Northern Ireland. The event is taking place in the Long Gallery on the 4th of June from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Members should respond individually if they wish to attend that event, and I certainly will be very keen to attend it. I think Sean's sponsoring it, and it's an event I'm really looking forward to. Important event. So members, please just respond individually to that. Anything else within 10.7 to 10.10 that members would like to draw out? No. Otherwise then, content with the memo. Members, you've also provided with, so members are content with the correspondence memo in the main pack, along with the items we've highlighted. Members, you've also been provided with a table correspondence memo at page 10 of your table papers with further items of correspondence, items 10.12 to 10.16. So I'll take the correspondence as one bundle. I don't have anything specific I wish to draw out in that. Is there anything in those table correspondence members wish to draw out? No? Okay, thank you, members. Are content with the correspondence memo in the table pack. Thank you. Agenda item 11 then, members, is the forward work programme, a copy of which is page 387. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the forward work programme? Content to note. Thank you, members. Any other business? Agenda item 12. Do members have any other business they wish to raise?
Notified to us, Chair.
No. Thank you, Clerk. Yep.
Nope. Thank you.
And agenda item 13, date, time and location of the next meeting. Our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 14th of May 2026, here in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. And members, as our final agenda item is a background briefing from RAISE on the Westminster Experience of Scrutiny of the Public Authority Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, known as PAFR. I propose the meeting now moves into closed session to take that briefing from RAISE. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Thank you.
Presses the button.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 sound.